Right. I'm continuing my series that I've started last month with my quick talk on the piece that I released for Piano Day. And this series is looking at the way I approach music, the way I approach the works that I do. And I dig a bit into particular projects, and I explain a little bit what the philosophy was behind it, what the production was, what the composing process was, a little bit of explanation so that when you go back to the music, you get it a bit better. And today I wanted to talk about the importance of the computer in my music. So I know there's a constant discussion on the computer and digital versus analog, and how it was way much better when we were not using virtual equipment, and when things were done with actual instruments, which is a completely valid point, and that I really agree with. However, I don't think there's a black and white situation to this, and particularly with the fact that the computer is just another technological progress, really. And when it comes to creating art, and specifically music, I think it's as much as a progress as the piano was a progress when it came out, as the electric guitar was a progress when it came out. I think it's just another tool to create something, and that's really how I approach instruments in general. To me, they're just tools to express ideas in multiple ways and in multiple sort of point of views. Now, when it comes to how I approach the computer, one must know a little bit more about how I approach my creative life to start with. I have a day job which takes most of my time, and my composing and my creative moments are very unusual, I'd say, and they're not really regular. They come very early in the morning. I rise quite early, or they'll come quite late at night. They might be at home, they might be on the go, and therefore the computer, the iPad, the iPhone are crucial elements for me. I write a lot of my creative processes with words, and this is just because, once again, I don't always have an instrument. I don't always have a paper to write music on, so the phone really helps a lot with this. I will record a lot of my ideas as well. I will sing them, or I will play them quickly on an instrument and go back to them a bit later. So all this to say that I don't really have a recording studio. Like I said last time, I'm currently sitting in my recording studio, which doubles as my living room, or perhaps it's the other way around. So the way I create is, of course, impacted by the environment I have to create. And therefore the computer is really, really important, because given the fact that time is of essence, and that equipment is not in abundance where I create, the computer really helps me to express ideas easily. So why am I talking about this? Because at first I was using the computer as a way to record projects, really, just to be able to put something from the instrument live to a digital recording. But I've started using it more and more like a creative tool, like another instrument, essentially. And I really like, I've sort of seen it a little bit like you could take photography and drawing, in the sense that drawing, in a sense, is the most natural way to represent something. But then photography came and created a completely different way of portraiting something. And I think one would argue that, drawing and photography are two living entity, and they don't try to compete with each other. So I'm really seeing the computer in a similar way. My instruments are guitar and piano and the computer, and the same way as guitar and piano could be perhaps similar to drawing in the sense that they're organic in their approach and they involve, hands and sort of technical skills. The computer to me is very similar to photography. It allows results that you would never be able to achieve with a normal instrument. So I started getting more and more comfortable with this, and comfortable with the fact that my music was not always organic in a sense, although I think if it's created by a human being, then it's organic. It doesn't matter the medium that you use to create it. But it's become more and more of a comfortable instrument for me, and comfortable production tool. So I was looking back at the projects that I've recorded, and I'm looking at them while I speak, and there's a few that really sort of picture this approach that I have. And I think the earliest form of the computer as a creative tool was when I released Anxiety Serenity in 2020. And this is really purely a computer project. It's harp, but you'll never be able to perform it in real life, because it's a recording of harp by Mary Dunsford, but then I've completely changed it and it becomes just something new, an entity in itself. It was followed up with Pianing, which was in a very similar vein, this time for piano, recorded in the box, so no real instruments ever used. And same thing again, it took ideas from looping, but it was really a production project. There is no way this could ever be reproduced live. And if there is, it wouldn't have the same quality, because the sound is created by a computer and intentionally created by a computer. There's then Tension and Release, which is the third project of that series. It was recorded from small sort of cells by No Mindless Scroll. And so from those cells that I've used as little loops, I've created, once again, something that would have never existed live. If it did, and I often think of this when I look back at these three projects, it would have to be arranged live, because it would not be realistic in the real world. Scrolling back up, there's a project then that's called Circles, and this one is interesting in the sense that in this one I've completely accepted the fact that what the piano was doing was not conceivable in real life. No one could ever take a piano and play that project and play those pieces, simply because they're inhuman. The range of the piano is so big that no one would be able to approach it this way, and that's intentional. Once again, it's really to try to create that sort of marriage between real instruments and computers, and creating that sort of third way into them. I then keep scrolling. There's my project Fragments, which is perhaps the most traditional in the way I approach the computer. It's really a production approach to it, and there's nothing sort of innovative in the way I approach the creative side of the computer. But then I scroll up to a project called Audiographies, and it's the first volume of it. It's a project that merges field recordings that I've gathered from traveling around the world. And from those field recordings, I've created sort of virtual instruments. And then the computer comes in and sort of seals this into independent entities for each of the pieces. I think it's, in my opinion, one of the most interesting projects I've released. not the easiest to listen to because it's not very melodic in the traditional sense of the term. But yeah, it's really interesting. I then go back to One, which is the project I released last year, recorded in Madeira, in the island of Madeira, with a guitar, straight in the computer, no amp, and really playing with the sounds of the guitar. So the intention was really to, rather than try to get that realistic sound that one would try to get with a guitar emulating an amp and trying to get the real sound, because, well, let's face it, if you want to have a guitar plugged in an amp sounding like a guitar plugged in an amp, there's only one way to go. You're not going to be able to emulate this with a computer. So I thought there's no point of doing this. Rather, I would go the other way around and I would try to create something that an amp would not be able to conceive. And in the same way, creating a project that I would not be able to perform again. And it's an idea that I start to like more and more, which is the idea of creating a final piece and that piece not being a performance piece. I think often when we think of a composer, the approach that a composer has is he's only writing notes on a piece of paper, and this becomes music once it's performed. Where I differ, I think, is that my approach is more the one of an artist, a painter, for instance, and therefore I want the final product to be in my hands. I want to be able to deliver that final product myself rather than waiting for someone else's vision to complete it. I'm not going only that way, but that's a way that I find more and more interesting, because it pushes the limits of what you're capable to achieve. Because rather than relying on someone to finish the job and saying, listen, I've written that amazing symphonic piece, but obviously without the orchestra, it won't go anywhere. Well, the other way around, I'm trying to think, okay, what about I want to create that symphonic approach, but what I have available is, this and that. How can I get that result with what I have? And I think this pushes me to think differently and pushes me to approach my music in a way that's a bit more interesting to me, at least. Last but not least, 624. Same thing, 624 is, and I've explained already that project in my last podcast, is a piece that sort of merges human with computer. And if initially it is performed with real hands, in the end it becomes a product that's completely independent and completely unique in its approach. Anyway, I thought it was quite interesting to see this, because I've come to the conclusion, as I keep growing and developing, and that as I keep creating at the moment, I start thinking, okay, actually, what is the computer to me, and how am I going to embrace it, and how am I going to use it as a tool rather than simply a medium to project my music. And I think with this approach that I've started to have, I've become a bit more creative, or I've become a bit more original in my approach, because rather than being limited by guitar and a piano and the few instruments that I can record in the comfort of my living room at 5 a.m, I now have that tool that I can sort of use anywhere, and that is almost endless. And I'm not a tech person, I'm not really geeky on that sort of thing, so I don't really use the computer to its full capacities, but whatever I've used at the moment has already satisfied that sort of hunger for novelty, and that hunger to sort of drive my creativity in new places. I also have to give credit to maybe two people that really sort of influenced me in that way, and this is Brian Eno and Björk, two musicians and composers that have really embraced technology. They're not the only ones, but they're the two I sort of keep thinking of whenever I approach a new project, because they've really, rather than sort of using it whilst still trying to be traditional, they fully embraced it, and they've been really comfortable with the idea that a computer is essentially the tool of our century, of our times. And I think not approaching it would be like Mozart refusing to embrace the piano because it was too innovative at the time. I mean, that seems just preposterous. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that quick chat. And once again, I'd love to hear your feedback. I hope that you'll listen to the pieces that I've mentioned. I'm going to put them in the description. I might even do a playlist. So I hope you'll listen to them and perhaps understand them a bit better. And if you don't, please feel free to comment or message me or ask me questions, and I'd be more than happy to do another little video like this where I explain a bit more about it.